All right, I'll call this special meeting of the Upper Providence Board of Supervisors to order Monday, March 29th. And our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I think we'll just take a moment's silence and consider all we've been through in the last year. And hopefully folks will consider continuing to be careful for just a little while longer.
She's on funeral. She's fine.
All right, we'll go ahead then with the meeting. Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda. I think everybody saw this on Friday.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second that.
All right, and I'll call the roll. Supervisor Kelsey,
Yes.
Supervisor Higgins,
Yes.
Supervisor Pearson,
Yes.
Supervisor Vagnozzi,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. All right. Our first item of business is to receive an update from the Library Working Committee and consider action regarding a recommend.
John, actually, since this is a special meeting, you're required to do public comment.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
Okay, yes, this is the time for public comment. If you want to make a public comment, please raise your hand through the Zoom application. And depending on which platform you're on, that will be under participants. Raise your hand, or it may be in one of the other borders. Do we have anyone raising their hand? Mr.
No,
Baker?
I'm not seeing anybody tonight, Chairman.
Let me look through there real quick and see if I see anybody. All right. Well, we have no public comment tonight. So let's go ahead with item 1 then and receive an update from the Library Working Committee.
I'm going to just kick it off, and like we did our last meeting, we have on our panel our 2 consultants from Dewey and LSS. Guys, Debbie or Chris, I'll let you guys decide how you want to take the order. I think the board members were given a timeline. I thought maybe we might want to start with that, and you can go over the logic that you used, and then we can discuss some of the components of those steps, one of which was a fundraising. So.
Okay. In that case, Chris, would you like me to share my screen and I've got the timeline pulled up and we can walk through it? Do you want that level of detail, Tim?
You don't have to like read it verbatim, but I think have it up there in case the board members have any specific questions on any steps. You can just give a high level overview.
Gotcha. I'll do that right now. Whoops. There we go. Okay. So
All right.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say is the committee's been working through this, and one of the kind of lay out a timeline so everybody at the township kind of had a understanding of how we thought the process would move forward as far as planning for the project, getting an architect, and having that work hand in hand with the township doing their fundraising. I'll let them talk more about the fundraising end of it. But I think the committee was pretty much settled on issuing an RFP for architects. Now, as far as that goes, there's a couple ways we can handle that. One is you send the RFP out to a select group of architects, whether that's 5 or 10, I'd say no more than 10 or 12. The other way to do it is just put the RFP out there and see how many architects you get. I can tell you if you go the second route, my guess would be you're going to get about 100 architects, and they're going to be from all across the country, giving you a proposal to do your library for you. So my recommendation is to go with a select few Obviously, the two architects that LSS has been working with to get us to this point, they should certainly be given the opportunity to give you a proposal to do the work. And then we would select a few others in the area, the ones that have library experience, ones that you're comfortable with, we're comfortable with, LSS are comfortable with, and go from there. So in order to get that RFP out, we would anticipate, according to the schedule here, we've been working through March with this, but we'd anticipate maybe another 2 weeks to nail down exactly what that RFP would be. And things that we would want to include in the RFP would be the program that's been developed, the budget estimate that's been developed, this schedule kind of giving them the outline of what we would expect from them to get to the point where we would be receiving bids. The site location would be important to have in that RFP. And then towards the end of April, issue that RFP. Now, the RFP itself would be somewhat like we did with the firehouse, where it's kind of, for lack of better terms, a design competition. We'd give the architects as much information as we can up front and let them come up with a plan on how they interpret your needs and wants without having the opportunity to really talk to you about it. Got to give them time to make those plans, present it. You guys would narrow it down to interviewing maybe 3 or 4 of those architects, and from there you would make a selection. So we would anticipate that selection to happen towards the end of June. From there, we would go into the schematic design phase. And the way the RFP is set up and their contract would be, the architect would have a schematic design signature, a capital fundraising signature, design development, construction document, bidding phase, and then construction. So each one of those would have a sign off. So when you hire the architect, and again, it's pretty much the way we did the firehouse, you're approving steps along the way for the architect's service. So you're not signing off till everything, because I know fundraising is a big part of this project. But we would anticipate about 3 months to get through the schematic design. And that's where the architect rubber hits the road. They start sitting down with you. We have biweekly meetings. They get your input and they develop the plan far enough along where they can create renderings. They can create virtual walkthroughs of the building. The floor plan is really set. And at that point, the architect has something to give to you and the group that does the fundraising, something that solidifies exactly where this project is going. So you can market what that is. Now, if you notice in the timeline, I'm going to let Debbie pick it up here, but the fundraising part, that starts now too. That's part, that goes hand in hand with the RFP and the schematic phase. And I think that piece is important because when you get to the point where the architect has things to the point where you're ready to go out fundraising, the fundraising side of things has done all their legwork up to that point as well, so that the two of them hit that spot at the same time and you hit the ground running as far as going, okay, let's go get funding. So Debbie, I'll let you take over as far as talking about the fundraising aspects of this schedule.
Thanks. And actually, we have a slide that kind of breaks it out into phases that does a little bit better job of describing without the timeline. So right now, I'm just going to note that we'll start right now with collaboration with the township's financial consultant. So we want to understand what all the possibilities and mechanisms are. And then we'll continue that work through the end of June. Start looking at fundraising consultants right now and recommend a couple of them first week in April, which is next week. So we're hard at work on that. So I'll talk about these steps in the slide, if that's okay with you guys. And then Chris, did you want to talk any more about design development, or is that's kind of later down the road?
Well, I can, so you don't have to jump back and forth. If you could slide the schedule over to the dates over, so right there. You can see that the month of March, of 2022, I have highlighted in orange. And what we did with the design was the schematic phase would stop when you start doing your fundraising. And then we would make sure the architect was on board to help in any way needed to help you do the fundraising, whether it's providing renderings, coming to meetings and doing virtual tours of the building, whatever it takes. We anticipate that process to be about 6 months. That's what I have in the schedule now. It might take longer, it might take less, but to be able to put a schedule together, that's where it sits. That's highlighted in orange because the month of March in 2022 is when we had the ability to say, okay, we're ready to keep on going. We feel confident with the fundraising that we're doing. We feel confident with where the progress is going. Let's finish this. At that point, we signed the architects on to finish the design development and the construction document phases. Each one of those, I would anticipate 3 to 4 months. And really the driving force of that is the land development, getting through the conservation district, DEP, PennDOT, all those things. I can tell you that was a very smooth process with Gilmore and the firehouse, but it's going to be the same process with the library building on Black Rock Road. It's a state road. So end of October-ish of 2022 is when we're looking to finish up the construction document. And it's pretty much the same timeline we had as far as with the firehouse then. We bid it in November, December. Firehouse we did October, November. So bid it November, December. And then you would be looking to start construction in January of 2023. So you can see this is a long process. You know, 2 years from now is when we would be looking at breaking ground basically for this project. And with the fundraising stage, again, I had 6 months in there. If we're 3 months into it and we go, hey, this is going great, let's get things going now. You could always start that design development phase sooner. If that's taken a little bit longer, you can always bump it back a little bit and start that design development phase later. So that's pretty much the schedule. And then if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the schedule, Debbie, just as a reference point, I do have the construction for the emergency services facility in there. And you can see that wraps up June of 2022. So just so you can see how that relates with the timeline for the proposed library. So
I have a quick
that's it for the
question,
schedule.
Chris.
Sorry, go ahead.
I have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt. When you say we've come along on our fundraising and it's in a good place, what does that generally mean to you? That you've raised half of the funds, or like what do you think would be a marker to say that we're on the right track? In other words, what are we looking out for?
I don't know that answer. I don't know what the township is considering, what they would like as far as fundraising goes. We did talk a little bit about that in the meetings. I'll let Debbie elaborate more on it, but
Sure.
I think that's a discussion for the consultant who would really have an understanding of what kind of
Markers.
fundraising is done and where what goals should be set.
The consultant might say, the consultant will gauge the capacity of the community. And so the consultant might say, okay, we think that a goal of X dollars is a reasonable goal for this campaign. And so the board can then, along with the financial consultant, take a look at other funding streams and say, okay, X% we're hoping for fundraising, X% grants, X% whatever other revenue streams. So it will ultimately be a board decision, but there's going to be lots of recommendations from people doing the work.
Okay.
So that's a great point. I did want to highlight that before we jump off of this, sheet, that there will be kind of a go, no-go decision. We think it might be in about March of 2022, based on how that fundraising is going. So there's going to be a moment when the board the board will have that opportunity to say, make a go, no-go decision. And we do want to manage expectations. So it would be unrealistic to think that Capital Campaign's going to raise half of the project. I don't know exactly what that number might be. The consultant can help us figure it out, but we have to be kind of realistic about
Right.
how much can come from fundraising.
Yeah, if I could opine on that, and I agree with you, Debbie, and we just need to think about this in reality. We can build this library. We don't need fundraising. It's nice to get the community involved and agree. We have to get our stakeholders engaged, but are we going to raise $500,000 or are we going to raise $1 million? I'm not so sure we can make $1 million. It's not the cost to build the building, it's the cost to maintain the building and operate it. So any delay in this does a couple things. Any delay causes our cost to rise. Interest rates are going to go up. We've borrowed money cheap, and for the next year it'll be cheap. We start pushing that envelope, it's going to cost more to raise to float bonds. So as long as we level set our expectations and we understand what can and can't happen as far as fundraising.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and before you spoke, Debbie, Chris, you spoke about the design development phase, and we decide when, then go, no go. March of 2023, a year from now, we should know if we like our plan by the end of this year. To wait 3 months, it's like I said, we don't need the fundraising, but it's nice to have it. And I don't know when you guys want to talk about organizing the fundraising. I think we need to start speaking to a fundraising company. They should be engaged with us now, and how to move forward with that.
Absolutely. Al, those points all make tons of sense. Before we jump out of this schedule, does anyone have any questions? Are we ready to jump out of this?
This might seem like a small point, but I really like to move back to naming this a library and not the learning center. Here's the reason I have for that. We have learning centers all over the place. They are essentially preschools or daycares, and I would prefer that a library is a distinct name and a distinct term. I also like the cybrarium if that were to fit, but I think learning center. Anyway,
I agree with Mr. Starling 100%.
okay.
That's a great point.
It's
We picked up-
deceiving, yeah.
Yeah, I think enough said. You said it, Bill.
Okay.
Right. Well, we love libraries, so we have no problem with that. And we believe that library can connote something that is very innovative and is very forward-looking. So we are happy about that. Any other questions or comments on the sheet?
Yes. Couple things. Chris, back to your selection of architects. Again, I know it's not quite in the schedule here, but would it be accurate to say that say 6 or 7 architects apply? You had mentioned like we could pick 3 or 4. I would think we would pick 1 or 2 architects, only because they would focus. They'd have a better chance of. Again, it's up. We're going to follow your guidance, but if we pick 1 or 2 architects to give us a final plan, they'll know they're one of 2 people, and we'll probably get a better proposal. That's just a thought, maybe for discussion at another time. But that's how I think of that.
And that's fine. My point was we solicit as many RFPs as we want, whether it's 6 or 10. And from that selection, the board narrows it down to who they want to interview. Whether it's 2 architects, 3 architects, we wait and see what the proposals are and see what really catches your eye and see which ones you want to come in and say, hey, tell us more about yourself. It could be 2, it could be 3. I don't recommend 5 or 6. I would say no more than 3. But I agree with you. I mean, you want to keep it limited.
Okay. And then again, I don't know if I'm asking the right question at the right time here on the fundraising piece. I believe that maybe not at this meeting, but certainly not at this meeting, but we should have some names by the next meeting in a couple of weeks who we can contact, whether it's LSS or whomever, we should know some people that we're connected to. Tim, maybe, I don't know, you get involved, but
I
we
think
should-
that's one of Debbie's slides. Am I right, Debbie? You have, I think, identified 4
Yes.
firms.
Sorry, I haven't seen it. That's why.
Yep, here we go.
Right.
I've got my sharing all. So I'm going to jump out of this document and we have. Okay. So Al brought up some really great points about managing expectations about what fundraising can and cannot do. And we concur on all points. So we did identify early on some possibilities. These are possibilities, these 3 are possibilities that referrals from former colleagues. So at a former job, I worked with Campbell and Company. They're a national company. Schultz and Williams seems to be the most prominent that's headquartered in Philadelphia. There's a couple of others that are headquartered in Philadelphia, but they looked like smaller shops that might not necessarily focus on public projects. If the board has any connections or recommendations of consultants they'd like us to speak to, we're sure happy to do that. But these are the 4 that we will start with. And then the plan is to recommend 2, maybe 3 of those to the board. So we'll do some due diligence right now and say, okay, we think these couple might be the right fit. And then it will be the board's prerogative to make that choice. And they'll do proposals. We'll request a proposal and there'll be some specific things that the board can react to. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So once that consultant has been engaged, so second phase, their job is to jump in and determine the corporate giving capacity, the individual giving capacity, create a capital campaign plan. So we're thinking, Chris and I in our spreadsheet said, okay, we're thinking 6 months, a year, but this consultant might have a different, shorter time frame, and we'll listen to what they have to say. We've talked among the library working group about the identification of a campaign steering committee. This will be really a key part of the whole effort. And that steering committee is going to be some, we hope, pretty heavy hitters in the community. And they will lend primarily their name and their reputation. And hopefully, if you remember a Rolodex, they'll lend their contacts to the campaign as well. And then the work will continue to include identification of major donors. We've talked a lot about pharma. Certainly that is the hope that there'll be some good participation there. And then we want to include building grants. So we don't exactly know what's available at local, state, and federal level. We know there's some money out there through stimulus. So we need to do that research, and the consultant will be responsible for that.
They'll be responsible for looking into grants.
Correct. That's the way, sorry, Helene, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You finish and then I'll throw in 2 cents if it applies.
So we would envision asking that firm to do the research. Okay, what's available? What's out there? And then the next phase is determine for which grants the township will apply. That can be a kind of a heavy lift, especially for federal grants. And so there might be, the township might have folks who can help with that, or the fundraising consultant might help with that. But those applications can be somewhat intricate.
I was thinking, and you guys can throw your 2 cents in, when we did the groundbreaking for the firehouse, we all spoke to Joe and Melissa and Katie, and they showed an interest in it. I wasn't sure if it would be beneficial to have a chat with them. They said, come to us when you're ready, when you have concrete steps, and we'll help you. They gave us a $2 million fire grant, and I'm hoping that, I have to lower my expectations here, but I'm hoping they can help us get some of these grants. Was one thought. The other thought I had was, if we already have some volunteers, and Al, I've mentioned this to you a few times, a couple of people have come forward and shown an interest. Maybe we could start putting an Excel doc together, or send the names of the people that are interested to Tim, and he could start a Teams group. I don't know how you want to go about it, but a couple of people it's an exciting project. So I think we're going to have some good community leaders stepping forward. They have already, so I don't know.
That's great to hear.
Yep.
Helene, the $2 million, the $2 million, did that come from the state?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we can,
That was an RCAP grant.
so
That was an RCAP grant.
Yes.
If you recall that Upper Dublin Library we visited, I believe they got $1 million RACP grant.
Yeah.
I believe, so.
We'll have to put Dan in charge of that, fire chief.
He has the connections. So.
Well, Melissa Schusterman is very library centered and she covers like
Mhm.
3/5 of the township. So I know that she's very interested and she was like, yes, I'm very supportive of libraries. Just tell me. And I believe, if I remember correctly, she said there's a whole lot of state money that's going unclaimed for library type grants, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, and look, I agree. We typically the senators have more juice than the state reps. I mean, they advocate all they want, but they really get a piece of the pie. And fortunately, the moon lined up with Venus, and Senator Muth was able to get a very good grant. It just all worked out. So kudos to her. But it came from a pool. And Helene and I have spoken briefly about a local committee, and we have to find some people that are forward thinkers who don't mind going to meetings. But maybe Debbie, your thoughts on this. I do think we need a corporate sponsor. Maybe we identify, I don't want to say names here, I have some thoughts, that we have a lead, and maybe this fundraising company can help us, but a lead corporate sponsor whose name is on the letterhead. That, this certain company is fully engaged. We want to support Upper Providence. Join us to raise money for this endeavor.
the way I've seen it done is the corporate participation comes through a high-ranking individual. For example, here in Baltimore, M&T Bank is a big donor around town, and their head of the region, his name is Augie Chiasera. So you'll see Augie Chiasera as a committee member on a steering committee for a capital campaign, but really what he's bringing with him is that M&T Bank money. So Al, the companies may or may not put their name on the letterhead, but certainly those individuals that represent the companies will definitely be part of the work.
I'm a chief executive of this corporation. They will take that meeting as opposed to, no offense to any resident, to the guy who lives on Cupcake Street who doesn't have the juice to get the meeting, but they'll take the meeting from the corporate.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that the township is the client of the fundraising consultant, and therefore we can push this timeline a little bit. Now, we don't have to, certainly we want to listen to them and follow advice, but we also can let them know that we want to get this thing done and we want to move pretty quickly. So that's something that we can and will communicate.
We could talk about it, supervisors, as well. Like, should we almost treat this like we do any other committee and interview people and make sure they're at the level that we want them to be before just putting people on this library committee?
Oh, 100%.
And maybe it's only 5 people, because I think the more the cooks in the kitchen might be a problem. But we could talk offline about it. But
Okay.
And it can be multi-tiered. So certainly we're talking about a campaign steering committee. That's kind of the top level. But there's other levels of giving and other levels of participation. So a volunteer might be right for the steering committee, and they might be right for a different part of the effort as well.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think definitely we need to hear from whoever we're going to engage as our fundraising consultant on these issues. And it might be better to pick somebody who is headquartered here in Pennsylvania that understands our structure of government a little better, and can give so something to think about.
Understood. So you guys have my contact information. If you have others that you want us to reach out to, please let me know. But this is our area of focus.
Okay. And these fundraising consultants, will they come and give us a little presentation to try to win this perhaps, or how will that work exactly?
My guess is that they will. Yeah, they'll put together a proposal and then walk through it with you, kind of
Great.
like we have done so far.
Great.
All right. Thank you. So I'm going to stop share and stop talking.
Hey. All right. Yeah, I think these next steps look very reasonable, and this is where we got to go to get things rolling. So,
At this point, we're looking at consensus. If there's no red flags, just so you guys know the timeline we're working on, I was going to work with the library working committee. Al and Lori have been helpful on this committee. We'll keep chugging along.
The only thing we need to square away is we still have not chosen as a group the firehouse location as the location. Because the Anderson Park's out of the picture, the little parking lot in the township side of the Black Rock Road is still hanging out there. We need a decision so that Dewey can go out there and tell an architect, this is where it's going to be, so that they don't have to provide two drawings or depictions to us, because the elevations are totally different. They would be totally different buildings. We need to pick the firehouse side, and we need to make a decision. Because right now the RFP has two locations, right, Chris? Am I accurate?
Yeah, right now we don't have we're only on one side of Black Rock Road, one or the other.
One or the other.
Did we just decide here on this call without casting a motion, or how does everybody feel? I mean, I prefer the firehouse side because I think even if we don't have all the glass in the back, of course, if we have it, it's still a prettier view, I think, looking at the woods.
Yeah, after some discussion, I'll entertain a motion if we want to nail that down right now. That would be fine.
Lori, are you okay with that?
I guess so.
Yeah, I'm with Lori about one thing though, and we talked about this in the last meeting. I really, if we're going to bifurcate the campus, now it was one thing to have the firehouse on one side, but now that we're going to have something that services the public day in and day out, we're going to need to look at Black Rock Road and make a safe pedestrian crossing there. I'm waiting to see what we get out of this crossing that we're going to get for the trail down to the river there, and we'll see how that works out. But just bear in mind that will probably be in the future somewhere. Not a showstopper at all, as far as I'm concerned, but just something we need to be aware of. That I want people to be able to come and do their business at the township, visit the library, not have to jump in the car to cross the street. So
Or almost get killed, right? So
agree.
it has to be safe.
I don't want to. That's a good goal, Ellie. That's excellent.
My bar's low. Don't kill anybody.
Besides the crosswalk, we could probably work with the traffic engineer to put some traffic calming devices on the road to slow Black Rock Road down a little bit too. But I agree with you. We need to combine it.
Yeah, and that, like I said, that's all in the future. It's just a small point.
So if you'll entertain a motion, I make a motion that we agree that the cyber library, for lack of a better term, shall be built or proposed, or we will have it designed on the firehouse side of Black Rock.
John, how are you about that? You didn't say anything. Just making sure you're on the same page. John, you're on mute.
Thank you.
You probably told us how you felt. We couldn't hear you.
Yeah. I always hate when we pigeonhole ourselves like this. There's no reason for us to make a motion to put it any particular place right now. We don't need to do that right now. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm listening to everybody, and I think, well, maybe the Joyce property would be a much better property. Listen, and my thought process is, we're going to spend money on making renovations to that building. We have no purpose for renovations to the building. This year, we're going to spend $250,000 just on some renovations that could be put towards the library. Okay, what a gorgeous setting a library would be there, and you could have that glass, and it could be put on the side of the hill there, overlooking the pond that's down there. That's my thought, but I wouldn't, even at this point in the game, I wouldn't say, let's pigeonhole it. Let's make it the Joyce property. I just don't want to do that right now. I don't want to make a decision on where it's going to go. We know, we have a good feeling about that. We want this to happen, but I hate making that kind of decision this early in the game. Sorry, guys.
If I could, we're not early in the game. And we're about to put an RFP out for a design, and the architect needs elevations. He needs to know where the infrastructure is. And it's not a final plan, but the elevation is a big deal. And so we're going to ask an architect basically split his time to consider the firehouse location, and nobody's even looked at the Joyce property. And I can't even believe that came up. But now we were looking at the opposite side of Black Rock Road. You're going to get two different designs. I just don't know why we can't keep moving forward. We put infrastructure in, and it appears to me 3 out of the 5 supervisors are looking to place this at the Black Rock Road campus next to the firehouse. I just don't know now how Joyce property comes in. We need to move forward, and we've looked at a number of locations, and we spent money to put infrastructure at the firehouse location, for lack of a better term, for this building.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm with you on this, Al. I think that we need to at least put the stake down of this is where it's going to be. And I want it to be somewhere that's centered up in the township, easy to get to. I really can't imagine putting it at the Joyce property either. But in any event, any more discussion? If there's not, we have a motion on the table to locate the library on the firehouse side of the road at the administrative campus. Do I have a second?
Get ahead, Lori or Al. You guys are on the committee.
I made the motion.
Oh, Lori?
I
No.
don't want to second it at this time. I don't think that we need to be in such a rush.
Okay.
And I don't believe in pursuing, just because we have sunk costs, that we can't keep our options open. And it's also not our job to make it easy for the architects. They're the ones that have to please us.
Well, I understand that, but I imagine there's going to be additional cost, and I don't know that it's money worth spending to get a design on both sides. But if we want the architect to evaluate each location and give us the pros and cons, I guess that's the way we can go forward. All right. Well, hearing no second, we'll table that motion and move on to the park master plan. I guess were we done with the library discussion?
I think so. Debbie or Chris, anything we're missing? I think we wanted to just be upfront on where we were on the timeline. So, and I think the big object was fundraising. And I think Debbie has her marching orders on that.
Okay. I'll have our marching orders. Was the committee and the board okay with the timeline as far as developing the RFP and getting it out to some architects? We'll certainly submit a list of suggested architects to the township for review. Debbie, the 2 that you've been working with would certainly be on that list. If there's any that the township would like to have on that list, certainly let us know so we can compile a complete list for your consideration.
I think we were going to use the architect on the firehouse, right? I think that's one of the local ones. I think
we were going to recommend having GK on the list, but we'd want to give you a few other ones too.
I'm sure they all have their specialties too. Like maybe there's some you're thinking of that really, I mean, I actually thought the first one from the original presentation did an awesome job. I love the design on that, but open to other design options as well.
And the nice thing is when you get those RFPs, each one's going to bring something to the table that you like. You own those ideas at that point. Whichever architects you select, you go, you know what? This architect did this. We want that incorporated in the building. So.
Okay, I think I'm good with it. Time frame and
Okay. All right, we'll move on with the next steps then, and we'll make some of these other decisions down the road, not too far out down the road, I hope. All right, do we want to move on now to the park plan, park master plan?
And I'm going to defer here to Jeff and Judith. So,
I'm gonna hand it right to Judith and let her share her screen and take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I'm pulling up the PowerPoint presentation now. From beginning. Okay, so way of introduction, I'm Judy Stern-Goldstein with Gilmore and Associates. I'm fortunate to have been working with the township and our staff back in the office on the Upper Providence Township Park Master Plan. Some of you have seen this presentation before. We did present to the Park Board and also to the Planning Commission. So some of you have seen this before. It's been updated a little bit to include some additional information. Primarily the cost estimates for each of the 6 parks, and also a nice preview of something that's possible at Black Rock Park. So I'm going to take you through this. I'd like it to be interactive, so if any of you have questions as we go, please stop, ask the questions. We can certainly have Q&A at the end also, but I'd prefer it to be interactive. If something comes up, don't hold back, okay? So just first of all, acknowledgements. The study is possible because of the Upper Providence Township Board of Supervisors looking forward and being proactive about the parks and recreation opportunities in the township, the Parks Master Plan Steering Committee, and your township manager, all of whom were very, very instrumental in getting this project together and completed. This project, the Parks Master Plan, is an update to your 2006 Open Space and Environmental Protection Plan. And it is intended to be adopted as part of the Upper Providence Township Comprehensive Plan, which will be adopted shortly. That plan is being prepared by Jeff Grace, and it will include this component for park and recreation and open space. It will also include a component for transportation, and together that will sort of embody the chunk of planning documents for the township looking forward into the future. The Parks Master Plan includes master plans for 6 individual parks within the township: Taylor Farm Park, Anderson Farm Park, Black Rock Park, McFarland Park, Longford Park, Reynolds Dog Park, and the Port Providence Park. The plan includes recommendations for policies that would support future development and improvements to recreation in the township. And the meat and potatoes of this plan really is the action plan, which is in a section called implementation near the back of the plan itself before we get into the appendices. That functions as the checklist of everything that needs to be done to implement this plan. The 3 goals are all represented. Under each goal are several objectives, and each objective then has action items for implementation. Each of the action items includes the priority, the timeline, and the entity responsible for doing that. Now, these are all guidelines, but it gives you some general and some specific items to implement the plan. We call this an implementable plan. What that does is it's a checklist, but it's also sort of your little tick or checkpoint each time you go for a grant application. Look, it's identified in the text of the plan, it's identified here, and it will certainly help Sue when she's applying for grants for implementation. This is just the general map of the township highlighting the parks and the 6 parks that were included as separate master plans. And if my little mouse works here, sorry. Taylor Farm Park, Anderson, Black Rock, McFarland, Longford, Reynolds, and Port Providence. The overall goals that were established as to be met in this master plan are to enhance and expand existing parks and develop high quality facilities that serve as destinations for community recreation, expand access to parks and facilities and increase connectivity between parks, nature, and the community, and to inspire and engage the community to grow parks, inform users, and promote Upper Providence Township. So those were the overarching goals that we had to adhere to while working with the township committees to create the plan. Support from the plan came from many facets of the community. There was the Master Park Plan Steering Committee meetings, and that steering committee was primarily the Park and Rec Board with your Park and Rec Director and your program coordinator. There were 5 committee meetings during the bulk of the project, and then we did meet with them when they made their recommendations. That was a 6th meeting earlier this year. There were 2 public workshops. Both were held virtually because we were fully within the age of COVID during the production of this plan. But both were virtual public workshops, one to gather community input as to what was desired or not desired in the parks, and the second was to present the draft plans to the public, and we did have feedback from both meetings. There was an online public survey, and we also presented the plan to the Planning Commission meeting, or to the Planning Commission at a public meeting. We're presenting to you, the board, tonight, and if need be, we will come back to the board also. So there were many opportunities for public input. In developing the plan, 3 overall goals were developed as part of the plan, and each then had objectives under it. The first goal was to create parks and to create great parks and enhanced facilities. That's not saying you don't have great parks now, but it's to make the bar even higher. Your goal is to have great parks and enhanced facilities. And then there are several objectives for how to create that. The second goal is improved accessibility. Some of your parks don't currently fully meet ADA. Some meet ADA, but are not fully inclusive. So improved accessibility is a major item right now. In with that is also creating trail connections to and from township parks and internal loops within the parks. The third goal is to have effective engagement, partnerships, and programming. And again, you do have a lot of community engagement now. You have a lot of information on your website. You have some great programs, but this is to keep the bar high on all of that, foster and create even more partnerships, and have excellent programming. So this was really to explore ways to even better promote the township parks programming events, use what we've learned also during COVID, and offer even more robust recreation programming for the township residents and explore new opportunities for partnering. So the first of the 6 parks I'm going to take you through is Taylor Farm Park. In this plan, Taylor Farm Park is proposed to remain as a passive recreation park. It's really focusing on sustainability, environmental education, agricultural education, walking trails. There'll be a meadow restoration, loop trail, community supported agriculture and community gardens. I'm sorry. Did someone just ask a question? Oh.
No.
Never mind. Maintain the vistas and the rural culture and view sheds on the site. There is the existing barn and farmstead on the site right now. The barn has been determined to be eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. At some point, there'll need to be a decision on what to do with the barn. This plan works whether the barn remains or the barn is gone. It really focuses on the potential for environmental and agricultural education, outdoor education on the site. And with the current proposed program, it's a sustainable site and it works either way. We have an order of magnitude cost opinion or opinion of probable cost for the site. excluding what happens with the barn, because that's still to be determined, it's just shy of $1.9 million for everything you saw on the plan. That includes everything that was on there.
I have a
Anderson,
quick, I'm sorry, I have a quick question. Can you go back to so the barn site structure, that cost isn't included, so it's 1.8 without the barn being considered.
correct. We do have some cost estimates for the rehabilitation of the barn to make it safe and essentially reconstruct it for public use. And that was done by our structural group in the office in 2019. In 2019 dollars, it was approximately $890,000. And if we increase that at a yearly increase of 3% cumulatively to 2021 dollars, it's approximately $944,000
To make the barn stable.
to make the barn stable and usable for public use.
Okay.
The full rehabilitation for public use. Let me know when you're ready to move
Yeah,
on.
thank you.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt the thought process.
Well, on that topic, it was suggested of demolishing the barn and building some sort of structure on the same footprint. I guess a pavilion, I'm not sure. Do you have a guesstimate as to what it would cost to build that on that footprint?
I don't have a specific estimate. It would be an outdoor education center, and from what I understand, it would be reusing some of the materials from the barn. But the demolition of the barn, if you bear with me just for a minute here. To mobilize, do the demolition. The demolition would be, let me add everything in, it's going to be in round numbers, 225,000.
Okay, 225,000 to demolish it, but then what is the cost of building something on that footprint that parks could use? It's going to be another structure. What's that going to cost to build that?
That hasn't been defined yet. That's really outside the scope of the study that we were doing for the Parks Master Plan. I have these numbers on the barn because that study was done in 2019 as a separate project. I honestly don't know what that number would be, but I don't anticipate it being that hefty because it would be an outdoor education center from my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Should I move on or do you want to stay here?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you move on.
Okay. Anderson Farm Park was the next park that we looked at. The centerpiece of this park is proposed to be a splash pad. This park will also have a trail loop, internal trails, connections to external trails, relocating the basketball court. The splash pad will go where the basketball court had been, and improved accessibility of seating and graded tiered walkways for the existing amphitheater. The estimate for this park is $2,465,000, so just shy of 2.5 million for everything on the plan. I don't want to rush the numbers by you too fast. Bill, let me know when you're good. Oops, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Oh, I had such a brilliant thought before when I was muted. Could we just get a copy of these when I haven't seen the price tag numbers yet, so if we could get a copy of that when we're all done mailed to us, that'd be great.
Definitely. The PowerPoint was sent to the township. I'll make sure I'll email it again tomorrow. And the numbers are also in the PDF of the full plan.
Okay,
These are right from that report, but I'll make sure they all get into Tim and Jeff tomorrow morning, Bill.
great, thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we have Black Rock Park. This park, the major new improvement on the plan was a pump track, and that's in the, as you look at the plan over to the left, or the western portion of the site, it's as far removed from the existing skate park as we could get it. So you would have two major modes of activity in separate areas because they are both very active. The other thing in this park were playground improvements and trail connections. I have to tell you that major playground improvements were proposed for both Black Rock and McFarland Parks. And Sue was lucky enough to be talking to some playground representatives and exploring some options. And this is what could actually happen if we took the park at the portion of the park at Black Rock and made it into totally inclusive element. It would be amazing. This would mean all ADA, and it would also be inclusive. When I say inclusive, it means that children of all abilities and/or disabilities could play together side by side. So you wouldn't be segregating people to different areas. The full thing would be accessible and inclusive. I think she did a great job. This looks wonderful.
Could you go back to the bigger plan? Where does this fit in near the pavilion?
This would fit in this area.
Oh, yeah,
So
okay.
yes,
Existing
near the pavilion.
Okay. Because that's right near, kind of near the skate park. So that's a good place for it.
Yeah, and it's near the admin building too. It's very visible.
If I could jump in real quick, two things. Sue is on the Zoom with us today, but she's lost her voice. So she's texted me and said it replaces both parks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear enough. It replaces the smaller ones at the two parks together.
That's a good move. And then I saw, was there an ice skating rink?
Seasonal winter synthetic skating rink.
Wonder how much that is to maintain. Is it?
It's the synthetic surface, so it's not actually maintaining ice. I don't have maintenance costs on it.
So when you
If
say,
you've ever been to the one right by the City Hall, it's not actually ice down there.
Right.
It's synthetic. And I assume there's some smoothing that goes along, but not nearly the extent of having to resurface the ice every 20, 25 minutes like they do at Center Ice.
Right, and it's not weather dependent either.
Right.
so when you put it down, even if it gets warm, you could still skate?
Yeah.
Yes, people skate in warm weather. I've never seen someone skate in 95-degree weather, but I've seen people skating in the 70s.
Sounds really synthetic.
It's synthetic.
It's not ice.
It's not ice in the term of temperature at all.
Interesting. Okay.
And then this is the second view of the inclusive accessible playground from the other side. And everything at Black Rock, except the additional increment for the new playground, was just shy of 2.5 million. The new playground would be more expensive than the amount than here, but from what I understand, and costs aren't totally defined yet, but the cost of the one large one to replace what had been proposed at Black Rock and McFarland is significantly less than the two separately would have been.
We need to hit the lotto, it seems like.
Well, we can, that comes later too. I think
Okay.
some phasing, some selective phasing, and looking at capital improvements and potential grant opportunities. I don't think any of these are all or nothing for any of the parks. And some of the parks, as we go a little farther, you're going to find some are very reasonable, especially after you see the large numbers.
Yeah, right. You set us up right. You're like $800,000 is nothing.
Oh, I've got one even less than that. You're going to be thrilled.
Good.
Well, I have to make sure there's something that you can say, sure, that's no problem. McFarland Park included the other playground that would now, in theory, be proposed to be incorporated into the one at Black Rock. So that wouldn't necessarily be here, but this park is an active park. It's your primary softball and baseball park. We're proposing additional trail connections, pickleball courts, which are very popular and came out as one of the things that residents wanted also. And then something that was requested when we met with the park board was some additional shade opportunity and some additional seating opportunity for spectators to participate and be there with their families. I know that most sports teams and the hardcore sports families bring their own canopies, but not everyone can transport their own canopies or has them. And it would be nice to offer some shade and some seating. So that'll be incorporated into this also as one of the revisions. And this park with everything in it included the playground, which would not need to be part of it then, was 1.7 million. Take the playground out and that comes down a bit.
Yeah, if we didn't do the playground improvements here, we would just leave the existing equipment, right? Because I don't remember being in that bad a shape, but
I'm going to defer to Sue on that one. I'm
can
not positive.
Sue text into her interpreter? Because I've actually played at all these parks with my grandchildren. That one I seem to remember was not in that bad a shape down at McFarland. And one of the play areas at Black Rock's in pretty good shape. The one with the one by the picnic pavilion there up behind the building. But of course, the one at Anderson is very nice still.
Yes.
She's not
Yeah.
texting me, but my assumption would be that for, they're about 17 years old and they're not, this is what she said, they're 17 years old and are not ADA compliant. So I guess.
I'm saying we wouldn't be required to remove them if we chose not to upgrade this playground. We could just leave it as is. Is that fair to say? Or
In theory, you could. The other part of ADA is anything constructed after 72 is supposed to be ADA compliant. If there were any safety issues, they would need to be dealt with definitely. As
Okay.
far as the ADA, you're having the one major one that will be accessible when it's built, and you would just have to make a decision on what you want to do with the playground in the interim.
okay.
Longford Park, Reynolds Dog Park. The improvements here would be 2 shade structures, pavilions. One let's see if you can see my pointer, one here and one here. And then also dog park amenities in both sides too, like agility and exercise and play amenities. In addition to accessible walkways, improvement to the picnic grove accessibility and some connector trails. And you'll find this one's more reasonable, $384,000.
If I can opine, I don't care if that dog park withers and dies. That's just my view. That park needs a little attention. I won't vote to spend a nickel on that dog park other than to maintain the way it is. Because nobody from our community even that lives here actually goes there. If you go talk to people, they're all from somewhere else. That's my 2 cents. Sorry. Wait, I'm on camera. Here we go. It was the black hole talk. I just threw that out there. So.
And
Well,
you just dashed Judy's cheap version. You're like the inexpensive one is.
Yeah.
I mean, I do go down there. I like it, and I think a lot of people do use it. I'm not sure where they're from, but
My thoughts on the dog park is that it's way too small. Way, way, way too small. And there's no space down there to make it bigger.
Yeah, it is constrained. Okay. Anything else on the dog park?
Mm-mm.
Okay. And last, we have Port Providence Park. This is a small park along the canal. The main features here would be a pavilion structure for shade and picnicking, an accessible picnic grove, and the main part of it really is the accessible kayak launch along the canal. I have to tell you that as far as the accessible picnic areas are concerned, the Park and Rec Board asked that the 3 lower ones be removed and just have the 2 upper ones on a path. They were concerned with the seasonal high water table and flooding in the area and didn't want any more structures or wood or anything in that area because of the upkeep and wear and tear.
We really do need the parking. That's great.
Yeah, the parking with the organized, I guess that's a nice way of putting it, the organized accessible parking.
I wonder if you couldn't even make that double the size, only because I know a lot of people would be wanting to put their kayaks in down there. There's not many places to go. I know people still use the Fitz, John. They park there in the lot and put their kayaks in. But there's not many other places to use. Go ahead.
The parking could be 3 times that size.
Yeah,
You're
I
right.
agree.
The accessible kayak launch, is it going to be like in the picture there, a floating dock essentially?
That's what's proposed, yes, that's what was priced. And
Would
then it would roll down on the rollers down to the water level.
Okay, and but would we have to pull that out in the winter season, or?
I don't believe you do, but I'm not positive. I'll have to check on that.
And how resistant is that to flooding, to high water?
That goes up and down with the water.
Okay,
It's floating, so it's not permanent at a permanent level. It does float with the water
okay,
to a certain extent.
right. All right.
One question, since John said that the parking could be 3 times bigger and that the township owns that parcel right next to it on the right side of the map, as I understand, could the parking be spread over into that treed lot to provide more parking for Port Providence?
We'll have to take a look at that. I'm not sure of the location of floodplain on that parcel. So before I confirm and say yes, we would need to take a look at that. But it is, as long as there are no environmental constraints like wetlands or floodplain, then yes, it's potentially there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
And the cost for that one, including the 3 picnic groves that are coming out, which aren't that expensive each, was $992,000.
Okay.
And then the next steps would be adoption of the plan, and then adopt the plan as a chapter of your new comprehensive plan. Use the action plan as an implementation guide, and also to help with capital planning. Secure funding for improvements and implement in segments and/or phases. We're looking at this as a working document, something that, well, you can see it's changing even in the months between when it was submitted and its final draft and it's coming to you today. It should be fluid. The major goals, objectives should stand, and the implementable action items can vary and be modified as long as they meet the goals and objectives. They can serve you for a good solid 10 years.
Okay, good.
Here, I'll stop sharing then.
All right. Thank you, Judy. Appreciate it. That was a good presentation.
You're welcome.
Do we have any more discussion? Any questions for Judy?
No, Jeff, are you on? My understanding is for the adoption, we have to do a resolution. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding too. We sort of have one half prepared, but we'll have one ready and we'll have it on the April agenda.
Okay.
And would you like me to come back for that? Is that April 19th? Third Monday?
Yes, third Monday. Sure. We'll be hybrid at that point. You could probably just zoom in for it. There's no reason for you to drive all the way down,
Okay.
at least in my
it's
opinion.
It's up to you. I'll make myself available and we can touch base as it gets closer. Whatever the need is, I will do whatever's needed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this was a really good, complete presentation. I think you can zoom in, Judy, for our next meeting, but yeah, I'm comfortable putting a resolution on the agenda for the next meeting to adopt this. We need to get forward. We need to move forward with this comprehensive plan. We're a little bit out of date, so. All right.
Okay, if that's it for me, then I'll say goodnight unless there's any other questions for me.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
very much.
Thank you for your time and good conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Mate.
All right.
Brian just said I was muted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The next item, Bill, is the Phoenixville Borough. I think I included the letter from the borough manager on the $28,000 contribution. This is really up for the board to discuss. We certainly have sufficient funds in our open space if you wanted to provide a contribution to the connector. I think the connector, I think their argument is the connector has improved the trail connectivity around Montclair, and I believe the total project that Phoenixville's paid for this is well over $1 million. So I think what they're looking for a contribution from the township is about 1.5% of the cost. Obviously made no commitments. It's up for your guys for discussion.
So just a heads up with this particular item here. The originally when this thing came in a bunch of years ago, I believe I asked how much, whether it was going to cost the township any money, and everybody said no, it's not going to cost anybody. It's not going to cost Upper Providence Township any money, and that's when we agreed to go ahead with this and say, okay, well, we're going to give you, I don't know, maybe Jeff, you can tell us what did we do anything along the way for this thing?
George Waterman back then had me attend the meetings, but he made it clear that there was no promise or intent to contribute with this project at all, just technical support as necessary. And admittedly, it really wasn't all that necessary with the project. So, you know, and just liaison between us and them if they needed anything. So
Yeah.
there were no promises made at any point.
And we never gave them anything to date.
We never promised them any money. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't donate or contribute to some degree in this thing. It depends on what you guys want to do, but I'm just saying we made no commitment back then. And this was many, many years ago. I just wanted you guys to know that before you go ahead and decide on what you want to do. That's all.
So, okay.
No, go ahead.
Listen, I'm okay with this. The caveat is I would really like to work with them to make sure we're on the same page of any future moves, plans, having two counties, two communities together, we can garner better support for future grants if we ever get that. We're fixing the intersection there. It really turned out nice. We used it. It's got Upper Providence. It's the only thing that we have as a community that says Upper Providence on it. So
That was the one
we could
probably stipulation that I made.
$28,000 for that sign.
Yeah, I think we should give them the money because we're all about connecting in the trails and they're our neighbor and it's not a gigantic amount of money. I think it's a good neighborly thing to do.
Agree. And as much as Limerick, and I don't care, I'll say this, you guys, also Limerick gets on my nerves for not giving anything. I don't want to be accused of doing what they get under our skin with.
Although they helped at that intersection, Al. We asked them and they
well, because let's just say they really didn't have much of a choice. But they sent a nice letter how much, $28,000? I'm totally fine with this.
Yep.
Yeah, I am too. I just put a Post-it note on a check, say, check ahead next time. But
Well, they think they did. I think we just need to.
I agree. And yes, I would like to partner more with them too. I'm also thinking into the future along there. You know, there is a big effort in Phoenixville and actually from some folks over here too, to try to bring rail transportation back to Phoenixville in the form of some type of SEPTA line up the commercial lines there. And if that goes through, we will definitely want to have huge cooperation with Phoenixville at that point, because that will change the whole dynamic of how that end of the township works. That's way in the future, but yeah, I think it's in our best interest to, you know, we'll just call it 28,000 for the sign.
Yeah.
It's
It's
beautiful.
it's a beautiful sign, and I'll get a lot of people make comments about it. So they did a good job.
Bridge,
So-
right?
We need more
Also,
stuff. We need more stuff.
also, guys, and I think it's a wise thing to give them the $28. I didn't want to say earlier. There was a thing in the works a bunch of years ago that will probably come up again. It used to be called the Schuylkill Loop. Okay, and the Schuylkill Loop went down the towpath road to the lock house. It went all the way up where the new trail goes now. And eventually that trail was to go across Black Rock Bridge there and then come back down on the Phoenixville side, and they call it the Schuylkill Loop. So that's a possibility in the near future, maybe not my future, but in the future. And so, yeah, I think it's a wise thing to donate the money that they're asking for.
One other note is Tim and I and Bill had a kind of a COG meeting, and Phoenixville wasn't looped into that, but I think we should in the future loop them in. So that's kind of another neighborly thing that we're doing, and it's all good stuff. So we want to be on good terms.
Hey, just one, I want to back up on the Limerick thing, just to be clear. I hammer on Limerick because they let them build that YMCA, and they should have put that intersection. They should have paid for that intersection.
Yeah.
And John, you were for that. So we should have never spent a nickel on that intersection. Limerick got something out of that, probably somewhere else in their town. That's why.
Yep.
That gets them.
All right, what was the exact amount, Tim? 28,000?
28,000 and some change. I don't have the letter in front of me. And just for, I think the genesis for their request is they did encounter some project delays and some unexpected change orders. So that did change their out-of-pocket costs a bit. So
That's fine. I tell you what, put it.
I've given them 50, but that's okay. Was that as in a movie somewhere? I don't know. I would have given you more or whatever, but it's okay.
Put a motion on the April agenda with the exact amount, and
Will
we
do.
go ahead and approve this.
Okay.
Can we do that now? And don't we already know the number?
We don't know the exact number. It doesn't.
Yeah,
say.
it was in his letter. I just don't have the letter in front of me. It's 28,000 and some change. I mean, it's what I will do is I'll reach out to the borough manager and indicate that we'll be getting it processed. So.
Yeah, we can do that in a couple of weeks at the April meeting.
Very good. Hey, this next item is the COVID-19 relief. I guess it's my turn to screen share, Jeff, if you want to unshare, and I'll share my screen if I can here.
I mean, you can now. You're co-host again.
Let's see here.
So co-hosting is like Kelly and what's his name?
Co-hosting is great when it works. I'm trying to find my slide here, which
I'm not sure if I'm Kelly Ripa or Ryan Seacrest at this stage.
Well,
Maybe
you're
a
no
little
Kelly
animate
Ripa,
for me.
that's for sure.
That was pretty good restraint, John.
Yeah, say,
I
right.
like that you stopped there. I was
You're right.
waiting.
I feel like
Is
Hold
Gail
myself
behind
back.
you? Is Gail behind you?
no.
Just want to say happy Vietnam Veterans Day to John. This is,
I was waiting.
you have to humor John before midnight. So I think that's the rule.
You're getting good.
Yeah, I'm G-rating this stuff.
Can everybody see that screen? It's
Yes.
COVID-19 relief. I'm still trying to get into the weeds on this. And I put this by saying on the out front, that the US Treasury is charged with the oversight of the act, and they've yet to put out their official guidance. So a lot of this is still kind of preliminary hearsay, but here's what I can say pretty much with confidence is that our total share is around, it estimates about $100 per capita. So that's going to be about $2.4 million that we'll be getting through the distributions. And we'll be getting the first half of this distribution on June 2021 and the second half on June 22. And I think they learned, I think Washington learned from their last infrastructure bill that it's nice to say shovel-ready projects, but not as many people have shovel-ready projects in place. So they're giving all communities until December 31st of 2024 to fully expend these funds. Some of the noteworthy highlights of this, if I can, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, is the one portion of it is it's used for the responding to the COVID-19 emergency and its negative impacts. This includes any unreasonable costs for responding to the COVID-19 emergency, includes aid to households, small businesses, nonprofits, industries such as tourism and hospitality to address the negative economic impact of the pandemic. It says nonprofits would include entities such as volunteer fire departments and the nonprofit ambulance companies. And authorities are also eligible. So that's one piece of information I got as far as that. This one I don't quite understand. I'll read it. Maybe you guys know what it means. It says providing premium pay to eligible workers performing essential work or grants eligible to employers that have eligible workers. It says premium pay could not exceed $13 per hour or $25,000 per worker. Eligible workers are those needed to maintain continuity of operations of essential critical infrastructure and are designated by the Board of Supervisors. Township employees designated as eligible workers could be given bonuses, or the township could provide grants to employers of eligible workers. I don't know really kind of what that means, so I'm digging into that, but I don't think it would be one of our high priorities. The next one would be lost revenue replacement for the provisions of government services. For determining lost revenue due to COVID-19, the Act uses 2019 as the base year. So the federal funds can be used to replace the lost revenues, such as reductions in liquid fuels revenues, earned income tax revenues, real estate tax revenues, or impact fee. So our consultants from PFM have this information, so we're going to be probably doing some number crunching as part of our analysis. I don't think we've been as impacted by EIT as some other towns, so I don't know what that number is.
So let's just say we had a loss there. We could take this money and fill that.
You would have to use 2019 as your base year.
Okay.
So, and it doesn't really say that excess monies would have to go to any particular use. You could probably transfer it to your capital fund, I guess, for other qualified projects. The next item here is make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. It says township officials should note that this item does not specify roads and bridges. Down there, I put prohibitions. Amazingly, road infrastructure is not included. I suspect that's because Washington is considering another separate infrastructure bill that will address roads and bridges, but it's specifically excluded from this relief bill. It says the funds could be used to provide broadband for residents, such as a hotspot at township buildings or parks. Townships are also able to transfer funds to a municipal authority for one of those purposes. I believe you can use this for some of our MS4 projects and some of our EPA mandated funds for MS4. I believe that's a legitimate expense. And I think I mentioned water, sewer, and broadband. I think the projects that we're doing right now in Tindy Run and Pleasant Lane that we're planning to do, I think would be qualified projects that we could apply that to. It's very specific on what's included and what's not included. And obviously you can't use the prohibitions. You cannot use it to boost pension funds. You can't use it to offset revenue sources and road infrastructure projects. Bill had asked me earlier about parks, and it's very gray on that and whether we can use it for park structures. So I'm still trying to dig down a little bit on that.
Or Tim, we couldn't use it. Like, I know we put off our road B plan. We only did A this year because of COVID. We can't use it for roads.
Can't use it for roads, from what I understand. You can kind of probably backfill it. You can use, if we find out that we had a certain amount of money that we lost because of COVID and EIT revenues, that extra money you could probably put into capital and do the projects that way. So.
Hey, Tim, to Helene's point, I do think that between the Ashenfelder Culvert, Spring Mill, Pleasant Lane, and the Caroline Drive storm work, I think those 3 projects all would be eligible and would then free up funding in the general fund.
Yeah, you're talking about for stormwater.
For road paving, yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying, Brian. Kind of like a shell game. Use that to do those 3 projects and then.
Correct. It would be wholly legitimate though, and I think those 3 projects would just about gobble up that 1.2 million that we expect this year.
Yep.
Aren't those items already on the budget or in the budget?
Yeah, and that again, like Tim alluded to, the Treasury Department's supposed to put out some real clear and detailed guidance on this, which we lack at this point. So it's hard to even have the conversation. That may say that strategy I just discussed would be ineligible, or it may be eligible. You know, we just have to wait and see. So it's good to have this conversation and have in the back of everybody's mind that this funding is likely coming our way. But in the absence of that clear direction, it's hard to talk about exactly what we propose doing it quite yet.
Another thing that's given me a little bit of indigestion on this is if anybody knows anything about CDBG grants, which are fund projects that use federal monies. Anytime you use federal monies, you have to use what's called Davis-Bacon acts. And you think prevailing wage laws are difficult in the state. The Davis-Bacon laws, you might as well take the paperwork times 2. And they have a much lower threshold for what constitutes a sealed bid. So I haven't seen that. I haven't seen the words Davis-Bacon, but my understanding is the IRS or the Treasury regulations are probably going to have the Davis-Bacon regulations attached to some of these bills. So, which only increases the cost of the projects. So.
Well, let's be clear on what we did related to COVID. When we passed our budget this past year, we took out almost all of the capital projects. We didn't attempt any of these park upgrades, which was already in the hopper at the time, even though we hadn't approved the plan. And we didn't really see a fall in our earned income tax. It just stayed flat. We didn't get the normal increase that we would expect to see, year to year with inflation and all that. So I would just say that if we're looking for somewhere to spend this money, I think we ought to put some capital project back on the clipboard, and maybe one of these parks upgrades to do with that money. But I'll let everybody think about it for a while. That's just my thinking. That's what we actually did in relation to COVID. We took all those capital projects out and we stayed with a very flat, very austere budget for this year, assuming again that we would have flat EIT revenue. I'm hoping that the second half of the year is going to be much better, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. But
one thing that I found a little intriguing is this whole issue with broadband. And, as we look at our new, whatever we're going to call it, a library or a cybrarium or whatever, it's going to have a lot of technology in it. So I'd be curious how much, what percentage of that you could use if you wanted to invest it into our broadband infrastructure. I found that a little interesting. So.
Well, right now, all of our broadband's provided through the Verizon, and right, we don't have a broadband.
But you have broadband, you have the wires, but they're not very specific on, what type of technology can that cover. It's very gray. It's very gray on some of those. Obviously, we do have broadband fiber. If it's limited to just that, that's one thing. I think they're trying to go after the whole issues with rural, the lack of broadband access in rural areas. So I think you're probably going to see more of the rural counties taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the current standing of where we. As we get more details, I'll keep the board posted. So.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely need some more discussion on this as we go forward. But absolutely.
I'm going to stop sharing, Jeff. So.
All right. Okay, and our last order of business is to appoint William Casper to the Municipal Authority Board to fill the vacant term that Jack Kraft left when he had to resign. And by the way, I want to thank Jack again publicly for his years of service on the board. But I'll take a motion on this.
Well, before we do a motion,
Yes, sir.
did we send resumes out to everybody who was eligible for this? Because I don't recall.
We had 2 people that showed interest in this. And yeah, I think everyone saw those. It was
I think they were in my report. I think.
Yeah, I think they came through the report.
Resumes?
What's that?
Were the resumes out?
There were only 2.
But did the resumes come out?
Yes.
Yes, they did. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about Mr. Casper's.
No, I know, Bill. I'm okay with it. I'm just making sure everybody. That I'm okay with it.
We had 2 very solid candidates.
And I know the other guy. I've heard about the other guy.
Yeah,
I'm okay with it. I just wanted to make sure because I missed the resumes, and I just want to make sure that we're getting them. That's all I'm saying. Okay, that's all.
Yeah, and John and I interviewed both of them, and yes, and I think they were in one of Tim's reports.
All right, I'll make a motion to appoint Bill Casper to the Municipal Authority to fill a vacant term through December 31st, 2024.
I'll second that.
All right, I have a motion and a second to appoint William Casper to the Municipal Authority to fill a vacant term through December 31st, 2024. I will call the roll. Supervisor Kelsey,
Yes.
Supervisor Higgins,
Yes.
Supervisor Pearson,
Yes.
Supervisor Vagnozzi,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. All right. So Ms. Shinsky can get a note out to Mr. Casper and then for him, and hopefully he can join their meeting later this week.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
I put other business unless there's anything else that's more of a catch-all, but I don't have anything else right now.
Actually, I have a quick question to Brian. Oh my gosh, I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but since this whole year of COVID, there's so much trash on the road everywhere. 422 all over the township. It's just accumulated. And I know we're still in the depths of this, and I don't know how the state program is set up to have, I haven't seen people going out and picking up trash. They'll be busy. But could you check in on that, Brian?
Yeah, I can reach out to her name escapes me, from Montgomery County Correctional Center. I'll be glad to do that.
So can we just, if each of us, excuse me, if each of us gave Brian a list of the streets that we see that really need it, then they can direct those guys onto those streets. Hollow Road is really bad. It's really bad again also.
If they're still sending folks out to do that cleanup, I'll be glad to direct them to those locations if any of the board members want to specify. I do keep a list, or at least can refer back to the list from years past. It's usually the same locations where it accumulates. As an aside, Sue and Sarah have been working with the Perkiomen watershed and their annual cleanup, which has expanded far beyond just the Perkiomen Creek. And there are numerous sites in the township that are going to be cleaned up on, I think it's April 8th and 9th, the first Friday and Saturday. They have a number of corporate partners to do it on the Friday. We're involved in one of those locations as the township. And then there's a massive cleanup on Saturday, the 9th. So should see some progress on those dates as well.
Is it like Earth Day? Usually
Yeah,
corresponds.
they do it right around Earth Day every
Yeah.
year.
Thanks, Brian.
Sure thing.
All right. Does anybody else have anything, any other business they want to discuss? Anything you want to discuss in general? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second that.
All right, we'll just do this one the old fashioned way. All in favor, say aye.
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 Bye.
Good night, guys. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Here.
Take care.